Welcome to this February 14th worship service for First Parish Church of Kingston, Massachusetts. I am the Reverend Monica Jacobson-Tennessen. I serve this church as its minister, and I use she, her pronouns. I have a call to worship this morning, which was written last night by my colleague, Reverend Diana McLean, responding to some of the current news and events of this weekend. She writes, "We come this day, maybe angry, heartbroken, despairing, or unsure of our path forward. Having seen our belief in the democratic process, one of the cornerstones of our faith, shaken by the actions of those elected to lead us. We come this day, maybe seeking comfort in this hour of music, of prayer, of prophetic witness, of beloved community. We come this day grounded in our commitment to side with love. We come this day asking what that means today and tomorrow and in the days to come. We come this day seeking to replace the voices of hatred blaring from TVs as we watched on January 6th and again all this past week, to replace those voices with the voices of those who have long been at the margins of our society and who are most threatened by the maiming of our democracy. May we this day find solace for our aching hearts and strength for our weary spirits, so that we may do the work our faith, our nation, and our world need us to do. Come, let us worship together." Tony Carlin, our music director, has generously agreed to serve as our worship associate today. So Tony has chalice lighting words to share with us.
We light our chalices today with these words from Reverend Maureen Killoran. Love is the aspiration, the spirit that moves and inspires this faith we share. Rightly understood, love can nurture our spirits and transform the world. May the flame of this chalice honor and embody the power and the blessing of the love we need, the love we give, the love we are challenged always to remember and to share.
Thank you, Tony. We are going to have a hymn now to join in singing. This was recorded for us by Kara Roth. The hymn is "Answering the Call of Love," to remind us that this is one of the things our Unitarian Universalism asks us to do. You are welcome to join in singing along, to hum, to listen, whatever is right for you this morning.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith we dare to proclaim. We are answering
My gratitude to Kara and to all of our singers who have recorded pieces for us to share in these Zoom times. Our Director of Family Ministry, Jen Shattuck, is off this morning. She is enjoying a morning with her family. So we are going to move straight into our reading, which Tony has to share with us.
Our reading today is a poem written for the inauguration of President Barack Obama in 2009. Praise Song for the Day by Elizabeth Alexander. Each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues. Someone is stitching up a hem, darning a hole in a uniform, patching a tire, repairing the things in need of repair. Someone is trying to make music somewhere with a pair of wooden spoons on an oil drum, with cello, boombox, harmonica, voice. A woman and her son wait for the bus. A farmer considers the changing sky. A teacher says, take out your pencils, begin. We encounter each other in words. Words spiny or smooth, whispered or declaimed, words to consider, reconsider. We cross dirt roads and highways that mark the will of someone and then others who said, I need to see what's on the other side. I know there's something better down the road. We need to find a place where we are safe. We walk into that which we cannot yet see. Say it plain that many have died for this day. Sing the names of the dead who brought us here, who laid the train tracks, raised the bridges, picked the cotton and the lettuce, built brick by brick the glittering edifices they would then keep clean and work inside of. Praise song for struggle. Praise song for the day. Praise song for every hand-lettered sign, the figuring it out at kitchen tables. Some live by love thy neighbor as thyself. Others by first do no harm, or take no more than you need. What if the mightiest word is love? Love beyond marital, filial, national. Love that casts a widening pool of light. Love with no need to preempt grievance. In today's sharp sparkle, this winter air, anything can be made, any sentence begun. On the brink, on the brim, on the cusp. Praise song for walking forward in that light.
Thank you, Tony, for that reading. I want to begin this morning by telling you a little story and then playing a song for you. In the fall of 2017, I piled into a car with two other UU ministers, and we drove 5 hours, because that's what you have to do in the West, to attend the installation of our colleague, the Reverend Cecilia Kingman. It was one of those beautiful days when the traffic was smooth and the company was good. And we made it north of Seattle in time to walk on the beach and watch the ferries come in before we needed to make our way to the church. And then during the service of installation, our UU musician, Jason Shelton, debuted a new piece, one that he had written for his friend Cecilia and for that moment in the fall of 2017. And to remind us all that sometimes we need to sing our theology. He made a recording of that song in January and posted it on YouTube around the time of the inauguration. And so I re-encountered it, and I have been unable to stop thinking about it ever since. So I would like to play it for you today. And I will play it again later in the service so that you can encounter it twice. So this song, when I first heard it, stayed with me in the days and the weeks afterwards. And I kept asking myself, love has already won. Who makes a statement like that? What kind of person looks at the world as it is, this world that has racism and climate change and violence and corruption, and declares love has already won? And yet I couldn't stop singing it. So I contacted a spiritual director. I wrote something to her like, I am wrestling with my theology and I think I need some help. And a spiritual director seems like a good person to turn to. Is this something you do? Yes, she wrote back. That is exactly the kind of thing I do. So I got on Zoom with this minister in Arizona and I explained to her what was going on. And almost immediately I jumped in and said, I don't believe in predestination. I believe in free will and I believe in the laws of physics. I believe in the importance of choice and the uncertainty of the future. So please tell me, why can't I stop singing Love Has Already Won? She said, if you throw a bunch of forks in the air, they are not predestined to come down tines first and stick in your lawn, right? Some of them might, but lots of factors affect how they fall. The wind, the force with which they're thrown, whether they rotate in the air, but they always come down. I considered this and then I said, oh, so love is like gravity. It's a strong force, but not a specific predetermined outcome. And saying this, I heard a less elegant version of those words that come to us through the Unitarian minister Theodore Parker and through the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Now, periodically, there's a hot debate on my Facebook feed about what it is that does the bending of the arc. That arc doesn't bend itself. Someone will say, we bend it. And then someone else will say, but we bend it such a tiny bit. It's discouraging. So it's really good to remind ourselves that it does bend, even though the arc is so long, you almost can't see the bending. And then someone else will say, yeah, but don't get complacent. It only bends because we bend it. Don't let up. But I wonder if focusing on ourselves as the benders misses the whole point. Because I think it is love that bends the arc toward justice. I think that's what Reverend Parker and Reverend Dr. King would say. Now, February is, of course, Black History Month here in the US. And so I take this month particularly to try to pay attention to centering Black voices, to listening to what the experience of Black Americans is. And as Reverend Kimberly Debus reminded us last week, that means paying attention not only to history, to suffering, to struggle, but also to Black joy and Black resilience and Black wisdom and Black futures. One piece I have listened to recently was one of those mini On Being interviews from the Living the Questions series, in which Lucas Johnson interviewed Dr. Gwendolyn Zahara Simmons. Dr. Simmons shared about her experience as a teenager being part of the Mississippi Freedom Summer during the Civil Rights Movement. She said, I was talking to some Black Lives Matter young people a couple years ago, and I was saying, you really have to love the people. I think this was one of the things that attracted me so much about SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and the SNCC field secretaries, as we were called. I saw such love for the people that we were working with and organizing. To me, this is indispensable. We must practice loving our communities that we are seeking to organize for change. I know it might sound sort of sappy, she said, but this is the thing that I saw in Dr. King. Dr. King had great love. He really did. He had love for the people, and that's what kept driving him. I saw it in Vincent Harding, deep, deep love. And even in secular people like Jim Foreman, Stokely Carmichael, I mean, deep love. And Malcolm X, deep love, deep. We have to practice that with one another in our groups and stop hurting each other as we build within our groups a beloved community, as we work toward the larger beloved community. Now you might be wondering, what does that really mean to have deep love for each other? Dr. Simmons went on in her interview, I was recently talking about my time in Laurel, Mississippi. There were just 3 of us, 2 guys and myself. We split up the list of households to visit. If people lived on the same street, maybe one of us would stay in the car and one would go to one door and the third person would go to the other door. And it was my great fortune that the door I knocked on was the door of a Mrs. Eberta Spinks. I was like, I'm wondering if I could speak to you for a few minutes. And she was looking me up and down. I had on my blue jeans and my blue jean jacket, which had become a uniform for SNCC organizers. She said, "Are you one of those freedom riders?" And I was like, yes, ma'am. She said, "Come in. I've been waiting on you all my life." That was the beginning of the Laurel Project. I lived with that woman for 2 years in her home. I went to church with her almost every Sunday. I didn't have a choice. We had to go to church. We had to live by her standards. No smoking, no drinking, that kind of thing. But Mrs. Spinks and the people the SNCC organizers lived with, they were willing to follow us to jail, to beatings. It was really incredible. The love that I developed for Mrs. Spinks, I don't know how you explain it. And for all the other people that I met and who became a part of the Laurel Project. Eventually, in the case of Mrs. Spinks, she put up 3 of us. 2 white women joined me. We had gone from a 2-person staff to 23, and we were scrambling, trying to find homes for these volunteers coming in from all over. And 2 of them moved in with me, so we shared a room. And at this point, the interviewer, Lucas Johnson, breaks in and says that in and of itself was a crime for y'all to be housed together like that. Dr. Simmons replies, "Oh yes." And so Mrs. Spinks, that woman sat up a lot of nights with a shotgun across her lap with the lights out. And she would tell us, "Now you all can sleep. I'm watching. And I'm not letting anybody bust up in here, not without a fight." This is the kind of commitment that these people made. She had a husband in the house and a teenage son, and these 2 white women could have gotten them lynched, and yet they did it. Amazing. Amazing, she says, and it is. That kind of love, that's what bends the moral arc of the universe. That love that reaches beyond ourselves. As the poet Elizabeth Alexander wrote, love beyond marital, filial, national, love that casts a widening pool of light, love with no need to preempt grievance. Or more locally, as the Boston Immigration Justice Accompaniment Network puts it, we fight for each other as family because we are. Now we know that so often in our country's past and in our country's present, we have seen different forces at work. This weekend, I admit I completely binge listened to an NPR podcast from 2019. The show is called White Lies. It's a 7-episode deep dive into the death of the Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend James Reeb, who was murdered in Selma, Alabama in 1965. Reverend Reeb had just moved to Boston and begun settling his family into a new home in Roxbury, where he planned to do community organizing work, when he and his wife Marie watched the news one night and saw the video footage of the Bloody Sunday violence on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. They watched Black marchers be beaten and trampled in response to their work for voting rights. And they heard the call that Martin Luther King put out for clergy to come from all over. And Jim Reeb turned to his wife and said, I have to go. I have to answer the call for clergy to come and be in solidarity. Now, I admit that before I listened to this podcast, I knew James Reeb's name, along with Viola Liuzzo, as two white UUs who were killed for their work for civil rights in the South, but I really didn't know much about the details of what happened, either the events of their deaths or whether there had been consequences or justice afterwards. I had this podcast on my general continuing education list. And once I started listening to it on Friday, I was riveted by the story's illustration of how corrupt systems circumvent justice by protecting brutal white men and fabricating lies that place the blame for violence upon victims and their allies. No matter how far-fetched and absurd, the lies seem to be embraced by perpetrators and their compatriots. In the case of Jim Reeb, who was struck on the head and eventually died of his head injuries, the defense attorney pulled an explanation out of the air, saying that Reeb had not been killed by the man who hit him over the head with a baton. No. Reeb had been killed by his friends because the movement needed a white martyr to draw attention to their cause. And the jury of all white men embraced it as the most likely explanation, despite all the evidence and testimony to the contrary, and not one shred of evidence in support of this weird shifting of blame. One of the questions that comes up in the podcast is whether killing a white person would merit consequences in Alabama in the way that killing a Black person never did. And it seems that when the white person is part of the civil rights movement, the answer was no. This inability of this white jury to face the truth and the refusal of the white community to take responsibility, the sheer blatantness of this tactic of turning fact into such pure projection onto those they see as enemies, projection that feels like it should be one of those exaggerated case studies in a psychology lecture. It's almost too much to believe, except that it happens over and over. These stories from the 1960s don't stop there. Maybe you remember in 2018 when a serial bomber was killing people in Austin, Texas, and the first bomb went off on the doorstep of a Black man. The police advanced the idea that the man had somehow bombed himself as apparently the most credible theory. And listening to this podcast yesterday, on the day that certain US senators once again acquitted a brutal white man, willfully flying in the face of all evidence, it is vividly clear how little has changed in so many ways. Still, I commend this podcast to you. Not only is the storytelling compelling, not only is the expose informative, not only is it incumbent upon those of us who are white to understand how these systems work so that we can grow in our ability to challenge them, but also this. In the final episode, the descendants of the man who killed the Reverend James Reeb share their own reckonings with their family history and their own movements toward some sort of atonement. Some of the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of these two families speak with each other. Some of them speak to the interviewers, but a few of them meet each other face to face. They make efforts to say, what my ancestor did to yours was wrong, and I am sorry for it. I didn't do it myself, but I want you to know that I grieve what happened. And James Reeb's descendants say, my goodness, the woundedness, the pain that drives a person to violent acts of hate. I am so sorry for your family's suffering. And these are the movements of love. This is the arc, bending just a little. Even now, some 55 years later, bending a little more toward justice, and it is love that bends it. History is not only in the past, it lives today. When we learn more about it, when we commit to being people of integrity who wrestle with the hard parts of the past, we become people who have a chance to contribute to a better future. In one of his final sermons, Reverend Reeb preached that each of us are called to commit to the struggle to build the better world that we will never get to live in. And that's hard for us humans. We like to see results. We like to be repaid for our efforts. We like to know that we made a difference. But I think Jim Reeb was right. And so are Cecilia Kingman and Jason Shelton. So I want to invite you to share once more in the song that we started with. I'm going to place the lyrics in the chat box so that if you would like to sing along, you can. You can also simply listen and soak it in. Because in these times and in all times, it is good for us to sing something that tells us, be not afraid. Love has already won.
In the flash of hate and terror, in the sinful eye of fear, there's a yearning deep in every soul, a longing to hear. Love has already won, love has already won, just as sure as the day meets the morning sun. Love has already
Thank you for sharing that with me. I have seen a request for a link to the podcast I mentioned. I will find that and put it in the chat box so that those of you who would also like to listen will have that available to you. I am going to pass it back to Tony to introduce the offering.
At this time in our service, we pause to receive an offering. Sometimes we recognize this ritual as a moment to acknowledge the gifts of life and love and sustenance we each have received, and to let ourselves be moved to share them. One expression of the flow of love in us and through us and among us is acts of gratitude and generosity, and it is worth pausing once a week to practice these acts intentionally. You may give to the offering today by donating online, using text to give, or mailing a check to the church office. All the giving information may be found in your emailed order of service. Please know that what you give will be most gratefully received.
Thank you, Tony. We have a video I'm going to share today, a recording of the song When the World is Sick. It does have images with it, some of which involve people wearing masks or images of viruses. So if those images are not your jam, you can look away from the video and simply enjoy the music.
When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, when the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong.
My gratitude to my colleague, Reverend Megan Visser, and to her wife, Stephanie, for editing that together. That is one of those songs that reminds me how deeply interconnected we all are and how important it is to dream together and work together for a better world. I am going to pass it over to Tony for our chalice extinguishing words.
We extinguish our chalice flame, but not our awareness of the warmth it calls us to share and the love it calls us to trust.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you all for being here. I am going to stop our recording so that we can have some community time to share joys and sorrows with each other.